Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Marchesi, and I, along with my colleague Stephanie Shantz, scheduled this short meeting with everyone this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. I'm actually in Milan, but we wanted to have an opportunity to tell you about this course that we prepared that I think will be very valuable and very useful for practicing lawyers, company lawyers, and it pertains to the subject of corporate compliance. And so, Stephanie, should I can go ahead and outline the course. Let me begin and just tell you just a little bit about who I am. I was a practicing lawyer for many, many years. In the United States. Before that, I was a prosecuting attorney for a number of years, which relates to my interest in my work with compliance, particularly in the space of white collar. And I worked at an international law firm and represented a lot of corporate clients and did a lot of border work. Even though I was a trial lawyer, I also did a lot of compliance work, and the need for compliance really grew as regulations become more sophisticated with the growth of digital technology. All sorts of things really contribute to this topic. And so now I live and I work in Italy. I work at a few universities here. I also teach the law school in Florence, and I also consult with attorneys, with business professionals. And one of the things that I do consulting work on is when they have cross-border compliance issues, I help them kind of identify the problem and maybe resolve the issue with best practices. So really, in collaboration with my colleagues here, we decided to kind of bring our collective expertise together and prepare a compliance course that is really aimed for, as I said, company lawyers, in-house counsel that are responsible for dealing with a wide variety of compliance issues. So if you'll allow me, I'll walk us through the course briefly and tell you how we've designed it, the subjects we've included, our approach to teaching, and then of course, if there are any questions, we'd be more than happy to have the opportunity to chat with you about them. So those of you that are interested in compliance, it probably goes without saying that you understand fully the risks that are associated with it. And so for this reason, it probably bears a few minutes just to use this as a starting point to help frame the approach to our course. In my experience, especially in the last few years, as we kind of navigated out of the pandemic, the legal and the regulatory landscape, especially within the European Union, has changed very rapidly and dramatically in a couple of core areas. And every time there's a new directive with some issues we're going to talk about, what follows is an incredible need to adapt, to build our internal compliance programs to meet this rapidly changing environment. And so for that reason alone, compliance training is really essential. One of the other trends that we've seen a lot in the last few years is that with compliance, and in fact, in some of the recommended best practices, there is an increase in the use of third-party service providers and vendors to help companies manage some of the compliance issues. But while there are advantages in using third parties for some of these functions, the use of third parties has also been very, very challenging. It kind of creates and brings its own set of problems. So we recognize that, and we've kind of accounted for that in our training. And then thirdly, the digital transformation and cybersecurity related issues have they were, when they kind of first came about and we all recognized the need to develop specific compliance strategies to meet the needs of, digital transformation and cybersecurity. It was a challenge, but in this space in particular, this has contributed to a lot of the changing and challenging landscape with compliance. And of course, anytime we have to manage business cross-border, we deal with different sets of rules, regulations, and compliance requirements. And lastly, the continued demand for transparency is what we see time and time again. Every time there's a change or a new directive, there's a focus on making sure that companies are transparent. So all of these together create the landscape of risk that our compliance programs have to continually evaluate and make sure that we are addressing in a complete and an effective way. And it's really these risks that we had in mind when we sat down and we thought, we have the ability to offer a very concise, valuable course that could be very, very helpful for those of you that work with compliance. There's another statistic that I wanted to point out that I think also underscores the need and the importance of compliance. And these are just 3 representative surveys and studies that were done by KPMG, Ernst & Young, others that really kind of underscore the value and the necessity of compliance. And here I've summarized the major findings with these 3 studies. And really what they show, you can read them, is that the cost savings and the value of companies that invest in compliance. You are far less likely to pay out money in damages, in legal fees, settlements, when you have robust compliance programs and effective compliance programs. On the other hand, for firms that don't really invest or don't really put a lot of effort and energy into compliance, the Association of Corporate Counsel study in particular tracked the consequences of this. And what happens, you pay out more money in settlement, but you're also twice as likely to face investigation from government oversight, regulatory bodies. So all of these reasons together only reinforce kind of the concrete and economical reasons why we need to make sure that compliance stays robust in our companies, but we also recognize that compliance is a dynamic undertaking. It's a landscape that constantly changes. And for that reason, for us that practice in this area, we need to continually be keeping up on the core areas. And this can be a challenge because, as we're going to see in a moment, there are many, many areas to compliance. And often we have a compliance officer or a compliance team, but you're usually tasked with having to manage and stay updated in a variety of different areas. And that can be a really, really difficult undertaking in addition to your regular duties and responsibilities in company law. So with that in mind, we've kind of come up with a solution to training that we've built into our programs that really has 3 major features. The first is there's a lot of material. There's a lot of complex subjects and issues that compliance attorneys, officers need to know. So for that reason, the training has to be focused. It has to be relevant, and it has to give you practical information that's essential. And so, I tell my law students when they analyze issues, you have to separate kind of the major issues from the ones that are more peripheral. And we really kind of take that approach to training, where when we look at compliance, you need a training that is focused on the main issues. And so our training is really focused on the main topics and issues in each of the critical areas. The second element that's really important in this program, this training program that we've created, and we emphasize this a lot, this is really, really critical, that it's not enough to just be updated on what's going on with data privacy, what's going on with the new proposed framework, for example, but you need to have kind of practical solutions and best practices. This is something that, I learned for many years in practice when I was working on a compliance issue. My job was to interface with in-house counsel and company lawyers, and my job was to help you do your job. And it wasn't enough for me to just analyze the liability and the risk, but I had to offer you a way to resolve the problem, the way to build a solution to prevent something bad from happening. And so kind of taking that into this training, we are very focused as we explore each of these core topics and subjects of compliance to always offer practical solutions and best practices. And the third and the final part of this training that I want to talk about, and this is really more for the in-person course that we'll be offering in Frankfurt in April. We've built a third element into the training that I'm very excited about. I'm excited about. I've used this in other training and it's usually well received. And we have interactive training exercises and practicums that we're bringing into our in-person training. And the value of this is that once you receive the information, once you receive kind of a practical solution, best practices, this interactive training component gives you an opportunity to actually practice certain skills, practice certain solutions, and then get feedback in the moment as to whether or not that was a good way to manage it. Maybe it's better. So for those reasons, we're very excited about adding this third component to the in-person training. So let me talk for a moment about the core subjects. And in this slide that I've prepared, we've identified, as you see under curriculum, the core subjects that are important for any compliance program. Obviously business ethics, dealing with conduct of employees, conflicts of interest that are both legal and business are always kind of central to any kind of compliance program. Anti-harassment and discrimination. This is especially important in the European Union. There's been in 2019, the ELA, 2020, there was a directive on work-life balance, and there were other directives that pertain to under the category of anti-harassment. So in this particular part of the training, in both the online and the in-person course, we give you an update, and then we look at some of these new requirements, and we add in recommended best practices so that you can kind of give your existing program a checkup or consider ways to improve the program. Whistleblowers, as those of you know, in the European Union, we have a relatively new directive from 2019 that the European Union has set minimum standards for whistleblower reporting and protections. And so again, this is a part of the course where we're going to give you an update on the directive and look at implementation strategies, again, a checklist to make sure that your company is following the minimum standards, and even beyond that, do you have good practices in place to identify whistleblowers, protect them, and to investigate claims. This is also an area where many companies use third-party vendors. So we look at that and we offer practical solutions to how you can avoid creating more risk or more issues with your interface with vendors if you use them for this part of your compliance program. The internal investigations piece is only for our in-person course. This has an interactive training component to it, but we review with you those that have to be involved in internal investigations for companies. I've done many of them over the years. And so we've tried to bring those experiences to bear in this training to offer how to organize an investigation, how to arrange interviews, things to do to protect the company so that you can resolve the issue internally. So this is always an important part of compliance. Do I have a good program for internal investigations when issues arise? GDPR and data privacy is a huge issue, and we're going to cover these both in the online and the in-person courses. This tends to be an incredibly dynamic issue for the US and the European Union, and for those that do business across border. This is really a critical topic. And so we're going to talk about the latest issues, and in particular, the new data privacy framework. There's a tentative agreement. There's probably going to be legal challenges. We're a ways away from kind of a final framework, but in this period of uncertainty, there are certainly things that companies can do to position themselves and protect themselves, kind of looking at the elements of the tentative agreement and finding ways to make sure you're managing your risk with with certain things. For example, data breaches, the right of erasure, other things, the storing and the maintaining of data. We will kind of review that in detail in both the online and the in-person course, again, offering practical solutions for you to evaluate your program and decide whether or not it's in good shape or might need some updating or improvements. The anti-money laundering and fraud, those that deal in this area, this is always an essential part of the compliance programs that we have. I think we are now on the 7th directive within the European Union. There's been a lot of recent activity over the past few years on anti-money laundering, fraud. So in this particular topic, we're going to go through those recent changes, providing an update, and again, offering kind of ways to evaluate your own program, and thinking about ways that you can make sure you are maximizing protection for the company. So with that, as you see, kind of we've in this slide, we've summarized which of the topics we will present online and those that will be in person. Practically, it's the internal investigations and the interactive training that are really going to be explored in depth in the in-person course. All of the others we will cover in the online presentation. It'll be in more of an abbreviated fashion, only because we don't have the interactive component, but substantively, you'll have an opportunity to receive the core information along with our practical solutions. So with that, the final slide that I have, and for those of you that are interested, we'll make these available to you. The online program begins at the end of February. It's 2 days. It's February 28th. We do the first part of the course from 1 to 4. And then on the 2nd of March, we do part 2 of the course. And I apologize, the only reason we don't do those on consecutive days is I teach all day at the university, but I shouldn't. So we'll do it on the 28th and the 2nd. And then our online, or excuse me, our in-person course is at the end of April in Frankfurt, and we have the days listed here. So with that concludes my presentation. Stephanie, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions anyone may have about the program.
Yeah, Lisa, can you tell us more about the interactive part that will be in April? What kinds of exercises will you be doing that's interactive? Lisa, I don't think you can hear me. I'm just going to type you a message since it looks like you can't hear me. What kind of exercises will you do in the interactive training?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a little problem with the sound. Let me make sure I understood the question. So on the interactive training, the question was what kind of exercises?
Yes.
Okay, so great question. Let me take internal investigations in interviewing, for example. We might, one of the exercises is we give a very short, maybe a paragraph of a fact pattern, and after we've offered some questioning techniques with maybe a difficult witness, the attorneys that attend will have an opportunity to practice doing an interview and practicing some of the techniques and best practices that we've recommended. So that's an example of the interactive. On the ethics and conflicts, for example, we do another interactive exercise where we present, and these are real cases, we'll present an ethical issue or a conflict issue, and we actually ask the attorneys to vote whether or not the conduct was ethical or not ethical. And then after everybody's voted on the particular problem in the presentation, we give the result, and then we have a brainstorming session to talk about it. This latter one is one that I've participated in another training. It was really well received, and attorneys seem to like this interactive discussion of conflicts and ethics. So that's another example of the interactive exercises that we'll have planned for the in-person program.
That's great. Can you hear me now?
I can. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's great. Does anyone else have any other questions? You can either put them in the chat or take off your mute and ask any questions if you'd like. Okay, well, if you're interested, and we hope that you are, you can find the registration link for the 2 courses in the chat, and I'll also be following up by email and sending you these slides and the brochure that explains exactly what both courses are about and the topics, pretty much everything that we've seen today, but in a little bit more written detail. And we hope that you'll join us. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure. I hope to see you at the training.
Terrific. Thank you.
Have a good day.